teachers, and welcome to our live stream coming to you from the British Council Teaching English Facebook page. My name is Karen and I work with the social media team. And today we are joined with Nnenne, who is here to talk to us about verbal feedback. But first of all, Nnenne, where are you? Because I think it's a little bit early in the morning for you.
Yes, hi, Karen. Such a pleasure to be here. And I am joining from Springfield, Missouri. It is 7 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, and
Whoa!
I'm up anticipating, and I'm really excited to be here.
Me too. I'm very excited as well. And I'm so happy that we're both together because we had some time zone problems and confusion. So I was panicking a little bit beforehand, but now we're both here and together and we can start talking about verbal feedback. So Nnenne, you are currently studying for a degree, but you already have quite a few degrees, I
Yes,
believe.
yes, I do. Um,
Um,
I I had my first degree in English language and linguistics,
mhm.
and then I felt I needed to know more, and I went on to get a postgraduate degree in education and a master's in psychology. And now I am studying at the Missouri State University, currently doing a master's in applied second language acquisition.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah,
So you'll be able to answer lots of questions. I think you know quite a lot of things.
I hope so.
So teachers, welcome. We are here with Nnenne and we are talking about, or we're going to start talking about verbal feedback and how to time it. So Nnenne, let's start with what is verbal feedback?
Yes. So, um, verbal feedback, I would say, is more of spoken comments. It could be suggestions, it could be evaluations, it could be um, it could be peer review, it could be um, your own, it could be a collaboration between the teacher and the students. But one thing about verbal feedback is it is powerful. It can bridge the gap between what is already known by the student and the expected learning outcome. So um, you, it's something that's pretty much can close the gap. So that's why it is very important how we
So,
give verbal feedback.
so it's closing the gap. Can you say that part again? It's closing the gap between.
It's closing the gap between the current and the desired learning.
Okay, so that like where the student's at now and
Mm-hmm.
where we want them to be.
Exactly.
So when I think about my own language learning, that gap is quite huge. And so the verbal feedback is helping the student get closer
Mm-hmm.
to the aim of the lesson or the aim of sort of speaking fluently in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to verbal feedback, there are some characteristics. I mean, there are different types of feedback, but some of the characteristics of verbal feedback is it has to be interactive, not necessarily instructional, because when it is instructional, you tend to make assumptions on behalf of the student and also on what you know about the student. So there has to be prompts, open-ended questions,
Mhm.
opportunity for dialogue, as opposed to this is what I have observed and this is what I think you should do, and which most times we do subconsciously because every passionate teacher wants the best for their student. And, you know, if you have a large class, sometimes it's really difficult to know accurately the strengths and areas of improvement of your students. But then there are some foundation that is non-negotiable when it comes to verbal feedback. So it has to be interactive, and there should be flexibility as well. Flexibility to adapt based on the students' responses. And this is one that I think is also very important, the potential for personalization. So your ability to not be very generic. Yes. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, your ability to not be generic and give. So most times we hear, good job, very good, bravo, well done.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, I
So,
think I'm so guilty of that. I was thinking about this in the class this morning when I was with my students, and I was thinking about this, that, I was going to be chatting to you, who have a lot of information and expertise, and you've studied a lot of verbal interactions. So I was thinking, I wonder what Nnenne would say. Because a lot of my feedback was exactly like you said. It was like, yes, basically that's right or that's not right. So how can that, what can I do a little bit differently?
yeah. So that's what this is all about. You know, when it comes to feedback, and it's not just something that you are experiencing, Karen. A lot of teachers, including myself, because
Mm.
sometimes, let's be practical, it gets overwhelming, you know, especially for those that have a large class. I'm sure some people joining in here, I've had a teacher tell me, so I had 70 students in my class one time. How am I supposed to personalize the feedback? And these are
Exactly.
realistic, questions that you get, especially when you have large classes.
Mm.
But then as a teacher, one thing that you should understand about feedback is it has to spark learning. Your student has to understand that this is coming from a place of, I want you, I want us, not just you, I want us to get it right. And the environment has to be right. So students have to come into class knowing that this is an environment where there's positive energy. I know that I can thrive in this environment. And the thing about feedback is, especially when it's done in the right environment, is it clarifies for students where they are going, which is something that we need to emphasize. So if your students understand the kind of feedback that you're giving, it helps them know what to focus on. And I'll be talking more about that, so I don't jump the gun. It also informs students how they are going. So remember, I said it clarifies where they are going. It
Mm-hmm.
also helps them to know how they are going. Are they going at the pace that they can, or are they limiting themselves? And I like Carol Dweck's her research on fixed mindset and growth mindset. So the way you structure your feedback can hold students back, give them that impression or imprint in their hearts that they could begin to see themselves in a fixed mindset. So you want to help them clarify where they are going, let them know how they are going, and you also want to let them be able to figure out the highlights from your feedback to help them know the next step to take. And also, they need to understand that the feedback should match the needs of the learner, and of course, promotes students' self regulation. And another thing that you also want to focus on is the flow. There has to be a flow. You can't, for instance, give you can't you have to know how to transition your feedback. In other words, there has to be a flow between what you're saying and what the student is doing. You can't do what is first last or what should have been done in person the next class time or lesson time. So for instance, why maybe during class there was a conversation on, let's say, vocabulary, and the student had, you know, maybe said something that was kind of going off tangent. That's a good opportunity to give feedback in a way that the student does not feel like he or she has committed something grievous. So being able to take advantage of the moment is something that you know, transitioning and having a flow, knowing the direction to take will help not just you, but also help the student's mindset.
That's a lot. A lot. That's very, very. Like, I think if I was trying to think about all of those things, I might get muddled. But they're very important things to think about. Like you're saying, it's bridging the gap and it's helping the student know like how far they still have to go or where they're going to. So we've got a comment here from one of our followers, one of the teachers watching, that it's interactive and responsive, which I think you were mentioning earlier. And this is one from, I think was talking about when you were talking about large classes, that if you're making smaller groups, you can maybe give feedback in smaller groups, perhaps.
Yeah.
As a way, yeah. So you mentioned something there just now about if you're noticing that a student has gone a bit sideways or is going off track, giving verbal feedback is a way to help them stay on track. Like, what sentences might you say to a student in that situation? Like, can you give an example of maybe what kind of feedback you might give?
So in this situation, you want clarity, right? You want to make sure, like I said, at every time your feedback is encouraging a growth mindset. You don't want to, at any point, make students see the classroom as a judgment zone. So, as much as possible, you want to clarify. So, you can make statements or sentences like, so far, we have said A, B, C, or I think this lesson is saying this. Right?
Oh, that's something. Right, I'm going to have to. I'll watch this back again and make a note of those for my class next week. So it's like kind of summarizing where you've got to
Exactly.
help the students remember. Oh, this is what we're talking about. Oh, that's that. Yes, I think I can do that.
And in some instances, you can use what is called inspirational statements. Personally, I am very responsive to a healthy environment. I like it when I feel like my voice is heard. So, inspirational statements can be, what if we looked at it this way? Or this makes me think you mean blah, blah, blah. Or what we could I wonder what will be your response if we did it this way, or I wonder how you would look at it this way, or I would like to add on to blah, blah, blah. So just being able to inspire the students' thoughts. Remember, I said the idea is for us to have a growth mindset. And in some cases, you also want to use admirational statements for the fact that you made an effort. You want to acknowledge that the students made an effort. So I like what ABC said because, and that's one thing I would also want to emphasize here. I have professors who have used this technique, and I actually made those comments during class during my classes. I noticed that there are some of my professors who, no matter what anybody said in class, would find a way to connect it back to the topic. And I admired that so much because nobody's nobody's statement, nobody's comments is useless. Whatever it is that has been said, having just connecting it back makes the students think out of the box, and that's what we want to do. We want to encourage an environment that fosters growth. So
Absolutely.
when you can also say, so I would hear them say things like, when you said this, I understood this. And just knowing that I helped you understand something increases my, it increases my self-esteem.
For
And
sure.
yes, so another thing that we also, okay, maybe I would look at, but I wanted to also touch on self-efficacy in the
Oh,
class.
can I come back just to the two you mentioned, inspirational feedback and
Clarificational,
clarification? Yes.
yes, and
And
admirational
and
statements.
admirational statements. And so that the example you were just giving there of the admirational statement is also showing that the teacher is listening to you
Absolutely,
and that you exist in the class, and that in
absolutely.
itself. So when sort of having a bank of some of these phrases that you can use instead of "good job, well done," can make such a big, like a very big difference. I just wanted to come back to some of the comments that we're having from teachers. This one also about large classes was peer feedback can also help in large classes. We're talking about verbal feedback, I think mostly from the teacher, but you mentioned also earlier that it can be can it be between students as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. So students need to know that they can seek help from other students. And it goes back to the environment that you create in the classroom. And peer feedback in the right environment is not just helping one student, but helping every other student in the class. Because I know that that thing I'm struggling with, this other student is also struggling with it. And just having an open mind and looking at it from different perspectives. Because let's face it, sometimes students feel pressure to impress their teachers and also to have, have the right words to say, look good in front of their peer. But when there is peer feedback, when there is also, you know, an environment where peer feedback is appreciated and encouraged, it often leads to students seeking and gaining the needed help that they should have without putting too much stress on the teacher, especially in a large class.
Absolutely. And, using the students to help each other is also, is creating a growth mindset classroom and one where students feel comfortable and listened to as well. So excellent comment there. There's another one here about feedback of clarity and precise. And I think that's something that your examples were demonstrating as well. When you said da 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 da, I thought about da 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 da, is keeping it focused, or we've just been talking about da 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 da. So I'm going to come back to that because I wanted to ask you a question about timing of verbal feedback. But there was just another comment here. Oh yes, about developing critical thinking and fostering growth as a growth mindset. And this one here, I agree. I give extensive verbal feedback. It encourages a student to speak up, clarify doubts, and share ideas with more confidence.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that. And one thing that I also wanted to touch on is the personality of the teacher impacts on how you give feedback. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to also know, and sometimes I don't know about you, some teachers have a personality in class, especially when you teach different levels of class. So if you teach younger learners, you tend to be a little bit more animated, and sometimes you tend to be very generous with your feedback. And then as
Mm-hmm.
you proceed, you tend to be a little bit more, reserved and extensive sometimes with your feedback.
Mm-hmm.
But the underlying factor is it has to be effective. It has to also make impact to the student. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's pretty much it. So talking about the timeliness of of feedback,
Mm-hmm.
um, the
I suppose
reason, oh yeah,
I think my question was around, is it long? Is it like multiple sentences, or can it just be a single sentence as feedback?
as much as possible, you want to make it open ended
Mm-hmm.
because when you give one sentence, it's more of statements which can be assumptions, and sometimes in feedback, giving is not receiving. So,
Mm-hmm.
if, so if you give statements, it might be misconstrued, and
Mm-hmm.
you want to, so you want it to be interactive, you
Mm-hmm.
want it to be engaging, you want the student, whether in spite of if the student is a high or a low learner, the essence of the feedback is understood.
That's the important thing, isn't it? That, yeah. We've got a question here from a teacher saying, when giving verbal feedback, should we keep a checklist? So I perhaps of what we've asked, or what the struggle was, or how we've helped, or what happened.
Yes, that's a very good question. And yes, we should journal, we should have journals. And like I said, the personality of the teacher matters as well. You have to understand how best you are able to collate each information of the student so you know how to follow up or where next to follow, where next to touch on. For some teachers, they are comfortable writing. And I like, this the beauty of technology. For some teachers, they use, apps like speech to text. They are able to record what it is that they're saying so they know how to file each student's each feedback that they have given to student. But essentially, as a teacher, know what works best for you, the level of class you teach, and the classroom that you teach. Just being able to, um, you know, understand the best way, because at the end of the day, it is the impact that matters. Okay, so if you want to for instance write it down. If you want to take notes so you know what to focus on in the next class, please do so. If you want to use recording, um, so nowadays a lot of medical practitioners who have to give feedback, and still a lot of still a lot of patients rather
Mm-hmm.
use kind of text or speech to text rather. So using such things, there are speech to text app even on your phones that can help you record and take it into text. So taking advantage of such technology, if it's available, is something that can help you, especially if you're in a large class, so you know what the conversation was and you don't go off tangent as well.
Yeah. Also, need some feedback to help get back on tangent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. There's another comment here, just in case we do go off tangent. Perhaps we teachers should also ask our students to provide feedback on the way we provide feedback. So, I think you mentioned earlier that the main point of giving verbal feedback is to bridge the gap between where the students are at and where they're going. And there's different ways of doing that with different sentences or paraphrasing and summarizing, but that has to be interactive. Are there instances where, a student's feedback can be helpful for the teacher?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For me, it's just like a balanced diet. No matter the diet you choose to go on, it has to be balanced, right? So if the teacher is doing all of the feedbacking to the student, that's an unhealthy diet. The teacher should also encourage the students to, so that way you know what to focus on, you know what to talk about, you know how to also structure your feedback. Remember I said at the beginning that one thing that you should always strive for when giving feedback as a teacher is flexibility. So yes, your classroom has to encourage feedback from your students. That way, you know if you are, because sometimes as teachers we get emotional, right?
Yep.
Yes, we're like, I want this to work so
I
bad. I really
know.
want this to work so bad.
Yep.
Yes, and it can hurt sometimes if you have if you really put in your best and you don't really see as much effort. But having the students give you feedback might know what you need to focus on. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, okay, we've just got another. This is an interesting question. How do you make students not be irritated by the feedback, especially some like students who might need more support?
Oh, ouch.
Interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I suppose, is there an assumption that verbal feedback to a student might be considered negative as a criticism, perhaps?
Yes. Like I said earlier on, sometimes we get emotional. And I like what one of, someone was talking to me, someone who I was having a conversation with before before we jumped on here. And she said, Nnenne, what I do is before I go into class, I understand that I have my own baggages to deal with. And if I'm not conscious of how much my experience is affecting my students, I go in to project that to my students. So what I do is I unconsciously imagine that I have a cap or a hat or a crown full of my baggages and I leave it at the door before going in. So that way, whatever feedback I'm giving, I am not giving it from a place of hurt, because sometimes you feel disappointed when they don't meet up to your expectation. So I try as much as possible to know what it is that we need to focus on. And that's why I talked about the need for open-ended questions. So instead of saying, why did you do this? You can ask, so what could you have done differently? That way, it is not direct, but you're also encouraging the students to think out of the box and just tell you how they feel about what it is that happened. So as much as possible, you want to keep it open ended. Remember, there is the idea at the end of the day is for, remember I said that we are trying to get the student from the current to the desired place. So what is it that you're doing right now? How can we get you to where you can actually be? Everybody's not at the same level. You don't want the student to feel pressured because there are high flyers in the class. Everybody's doing the best that they can at that time. But you wouldn't see that best if you come from a judgmental place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got another question about feedback. Um, so, oh wait, it was this one. I'll do this one first and the other one second. Is it done in front of the class? Like, are you going up, approaching the student on a one-to-one basis, or are you doing it, or is there a mixture of both? This teacher is saying it may hinder the studying as a negative side, or maybe going towards the written feedback. And the other one, this was the other one, sort of connected. Maybe some students are shy to provide feedback. This is to do with getting feedback from students, but I think it's connected to, how are you doing it? How are you getting and giving the feedback?
Absolutely. So remember, I talked about efficacy. So self-efficacy is pretty much something that a lot of students have to deal with. So it is the level of confidence that each student exudes in class. So this should not be confused in any way with self-esteem. Self-esteem is how they feel about themselves. And yes, you're right. Some students are shy. However, it doesn't mean that they do not understand their self-efficacy. So there are students with high self-efficacy and students with low self-efficacy. So students with high self-efficacy are more likely to make more optimized participation about their performance or about something in class. It doesn't mean that they have high esteem. So students with low self-efficacy usually can react negatively. So those are the students that you want to be careful or conscious of how you give both positive and negative feedback. But students with low self-efficacy can react negatively, and sometimes they exhibit, shyness. Remember, it is different from esteem. So you are, for instance, if I say something like, you are you are mastering you are mastering this problem, or I say something like, you have been working really hard, because the student has low efficacy, for the fact that I have started off acknowledging their efforts, as opposed to, why did you make this error? Or don't you think you should have done it this way? Or didn't we actually practice this in class? Those statements will be interpreted as negative, and that's why sometimes students are shy to contribute, because of their either low efficacy. And imagine a student having low efficacy and low self-esteem, the student will definitely have trouble participating in class. But as much as possible, you want them to see the reason. Success mindset should be at the center of teaching. So how the student interprets it will let you know. So even after giving feedback, you can have the student give you an interpretation of what they think about the feedback. And the relationship you have with your student determines how they give you feedback actually. So I understood it. I felt belittled. I felt encouraged. I felt like I needed to do this. You want them to get to that point where they are able to have that conversation and say, oh, because we had this conversation, I was able to see this. That's the goal.
That's the goal, yeah. And I think a lot of teachers know their students, sort of how they'll respond to different types of feedback as well. Nnenne, we've got so many comments all of a sudden flooding in.
I'm like, my eyes are going this way, this
I
way. I'm like,
know.
should I keep up with this? Should I look here?
Yeah. Yes. There was one I just wanted to here. It was this one. Oral feedback really motivates the learner and can be easy to give a prompt response of teacher to boost the learners to cross the obstacles and to move closer to where they're needing to go. So as you were saying, sort of timely and carefully worded phrases.
Yes.
There was another one here about this. So is there room for learner training on receiving, understanding feedback and acting on it? So, I think you were talking about earlier about having a classroom that you create a space that is safe and comfortable for students to express themselves and for the teacher to guide them. So how do you train your students to be able to receive that feedback? I think is what this question is saying.
That's a very good question.
Great question.
The questions have been amazing, and
I know, right?
yeah, yeah, they have been truly amazing. And you can tell, you know, honestly, I always say this: I don't know what else I would do if I was not a teacher. Whether, the impact teachers have across the world is unquantifiable. Like when you see the quality of the questions, you know that these teachers actually have the best interest of their students at heart. And I
Absolutely.
am grateful that we're having this conversation. So, yeah, sorry, I had to just put that out there. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. It's true. Teachers are watching, like, awesome
Yeah.
questions, really great questions. The time has flown by though, and it's time to finish. But do carry on the conversation in the comments. Keep the questions going. We will be answering them afterwards. We'll come back and join you in the comments later. Nnenne, thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning and sharing your words of wisdom. Definitely, I am going to be thinking very carefully about how I give feedback in my next lessons. And I might write down some of those very useful, practical sentences and questions that you gave us earlier. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Any final single top tip for teachers when giving verbal feedback?
Yeah. So someone asked about the last question was about learner training. So I will just quickly touch on that. As much as possible, you're not alone as a teacher. There are wonderful resources out there. The British Council has amazing resources that you can leverage on. There are also teachers, there are people in the academia, scholars who are passionate about feedback. So please take advantage of it as much as possible. Ask questions. The world is, connecting us by the day. Look up, LinkedIn and other platforms. You can find topics on this, and also ask your school. Put up a proposal to your school for such training, because this is very important. Teachers are shaping the world and shaping, students. So you don't want the impact that you have to have a negative ripple effect. The students should be able to communicate better because you gave a good verbal feedback. So take advantage of all of these resources and keep learning, never stop learning.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nnenne. Thank you, Marcus. Marcus has just put a link for some resources in the comments. And thanks, Marcus, for helping out in the moderation. And Nnenne, have a fantastic day, and everybody have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you all very soon. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.